Introduced in 1967, the PeopleMover was a transport attraction in Tomorrowland wherein guests would board small, futuristic-looking trains that drove along elevated tracks that looped around Tomorrowland, providing a quote-unquote grand circle tour. The attraction was initially seen as a prototype for future inner-city transportation solutions. Starting from the rocket jets, the track would actually pass through a few show buildings, giving guests a look inside various attractions, restaurants, and shops, including but not limited to Adventure Through Inner Space, the Star Trader, and the Starcade.
Just below us is the Star Trader, where you'll find the largest selection of Disney signature clothing, toys, and gift items here at the Magic Kingdom.
The track would then loop around the areas above Autopia and the Submarine Lagoon, sometimes going parallel with the Disneyland monorail before passing through a few more show buildings, going parallel with itself down the middle of the main entrance to Tomorrowland, and of course returning to the station. Over the next 30 years that it was open, numerous changes were made to the trains, the track itself, and the overlay. The most notable of these occurring in 1986, when the attraction was rethemed to the PeopleMover Through the World of Tron, of course following the release of the movie Tron. This remodel included a new onboard soundtrack, as well as projections of the Tron game grid on the walls of one of the show buildings that the ride passed through. Multiple changes had been made to the trains and track over the years for safety purposes. You see, the PeopleMover had a few incidents wherein guests had been killed or seriously injured while attempting to jump off or in between the trains. So the track's railing was improved and additional railing was added to the trains themselves. The trains were also repainted several times over the years to match the Disneyland monorail. Then in 1995, as a part of the Tomorrowland 2055 makeover, the PeopleMover sadly closed. The Imagineers believed that it was no longer ahead of its time, and that it had become more of a place for guests to rest their feet. The PeopleMover's closing was also a part of then Chairman and CEO of the Disney company, Michael Eisner's program to cut costs through the closing of expensive attractions. Assuming the place of the PeopleMover were the Rocket Rods, which was a much faster-paced ride that ran along the PeopleMover track. The problem was, the Rocket Rods were prone to a plethora of mechanical issues, and was quite prone to breakdowns. The mechanical issues grew to be so bad that the company just decided to shut the ride down completely. And with that, the Rocket Rods closed down in the year 2000, just 2 years after it opened. Today, 22 years later, the track continues to be abandoned. Well, not entirely. The staff actually continues to clean and maintain the tracks to this day, 22 years after the ride's closure, as to not take away from the beauty of Tomorrowland. They do such a good job with this that it seems like it could totally be an operational ride that just happens to be closed for refurbishment, or something like that.
What ride goes across?
That used to be the PeopleMover, which closed in the 90s. After that it became the Rocket Rods, which closed 2 years after it opened, and that was 20 years ago. So why should the PeopleMover be brought back? Tomorrowland in the recent years has lost a lot of its magic, especially its original visions and purpose. And the biggest reason for this is the ever-increasing amount of abandoned or unfitting attractions. The largest of the abandoned attractions is the PeopleMover track, which extends throughout the entirety of Tomorrowland. Basically, if you're outside, you can see it. Now, one of the original purposes of Disneyland was to bring the experience of a movie theater to life. This is especially evident with the movie theater style ticket booths and entrance. Once you got your ticket, you could go in and see a fantasy movie with dragons, knights, dwarves, and princesses, or maybe you could go see an Old West movie, or maybe an action and adventure movie. Or you could go see a futuristic movie. Tomorrowland is the futuristic movie, but brought to life. If you've watched literally any movie that contains a prediction of the future that is somewhat bright, you'll notice that transportation is always one of the biggest factors. You've got flying cars, spaceships, monorails, bubbles for some reason. Meet the Robinsons was kind of weird. Literally, the PeopleMover itself shows up in the movie WALL-E. Tomorrowland used to have that scene. At one point in Tomorrowland's history, you could look up and see the Disneyland monorail, the PeopleMover, and the Skyway to Fantasyland all together. Today, we have the Disneyland monorail, and that's about it. Not to say that the Disneyland monorail isn't futuristic, of course, because it still is. Bringing back the PeopleMover could definitely restore a lot of this energy that went missing. It would also remove a lot of the confusion among new and or uninformed guests, wondering what the big abandoned track that leads throughout Tomorrowland is supposed to be. Okay, so now that we've gone over some of the aesthetic benefits of reintroducing the PeopleMover, let's talk practicality. In its day, the PeopleMover had by far the largest maximum hourly capacity out of any other ride in the park, and could service up to 4,885 people per hour. Now, to give you some perspective on how incredible that number really is, the ride with the next largest maximum hourly capacity is Pirates of the Caribbean, which can service up to 3,430 guests per hour. The Space Mountain, which is generally considered to have a very efficient loading system, can service up to 1,840 people per hour. The ride with the lowest hourly capacity is the Astro Orbiter, which can service up to 300 guests per hour. Now, the reason why the PeopleMover could service as many people per hour as it did was because the track was so long that there were always 62 trains on the track at a given time, with each train holding 16 people each. The loading system was also similar to that of something that you would see in maybe Buzz Lightyear's Astro Blasters or the Haunted Mansion, wherein the ride moves at a slow enough pace that guests can enter and exit without the ride having to come to a stop. Now, if you spent any time in Tomorrowland recently, you'll know that the lines just tend to be very long. The average wait time of the majority of the rides in Tomorrowland, not including the Disneyland monorail, is around 45 minutes, according to Thrill Data, with the average wait time of Space Mountain being around 65 minutes. Now, that's long, but not terribly long. That being said, however, this data is taken from a yearly average, including the months wherein Disneyland's attendance is very low, such as September through February. The average wait times are much higher in the months of April through August. The reintroduction of such a high-capacity ride like the PeopleMover could definitely disperse a lot of the crowds that congregate in the Tomorrowland area, as well as potentially shorten a lot of the average wait times of attractions in the area. Now, as I said earlier, one of the reasons that the Imagineers had in mind when they closed the PeopleMover was how the attraction had turned into more of a resting, end-of-the-day, put-up-your-feet type of attraction. And to be frank, Disneyland these days needs more attractions like this. With the recent expansion of Star Wars Land, along with the introduction of 2 new e-ticket rides in the form of Rise of the Resistance and the Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run, as well as the introduction of Genie Plus and Lightning Lane, guests can get in a lot more activities during their Disneyland day. And more activities means more walking. If you've ever spent a full day at Disneyland, and I mean a full day, from rope drop to closing time, you're going to be pretty wiped out by the end of the day. At the moment, there are only 2 big resting attractions, which come in the form of the Disneyland Monorail and the Disneyland Railroad. Bringing back the PeopleMover could provide an additional attraction to ride at the end of the day when you just want to sit down, relax, and take a break from the crowds. Now, is it possible to bring back the PeopleMover? Back in 2010, the then president of the Disneyland Resort, George Kalogridis, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, stated during a D23 event that there were plans to bring back the PeopleMover. However, the park would not be able to entirely restore it to its original form as a result of stricter codes and regulations. Now that sounds discouraging. So let's take a second to remember that the PeopleMover still exists in Walt Disney World, so they got it to work somehow. You see, I feel like if the Disney company never wanted to bring back the PeopleMover, or something along the lines of it, they would have completely removed it by now. They actually had the perfect opportunity to during the COVID-19 pandemic when the entire park shut down for a full year. But they didn't. In fact, the employees continue to maintain the abandoned track along with routine cleaning and repainting when needed. Comment down below if you guys think that the PeopleMover will return in our lifetimes, and if you agree with the return of it. Other than that, ladies and gentlemen, that is all I have for you guys today. I try to make at least one of these long analysis type of videos at least once a week. And I also like to put out a sort of Disneyland fun fact short video about 3 or 4 times a week. So stay tuned for those if you're interested. And if you guys are interested in gaming content, I do have a gaming channel called Pillowy Flunky9 that I've had for a lot longer than this channel. If you're interested in that, I will leave a link in the description for that, as well as one in the top right corner, which you'll see in a second. Anyway, guys, I am the Space Mountaineer. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.